Okay, so metal.
Metal.
The show's about metal.
What is metal? We're going to spread the hidden value in music.
We're going to proselytize. We're going to get the word out there.
We are.
That's important.
Wee-oo, wee-oo, wee-oo. That was the violin, because today on the Great Metal Podcast, we're talking about symphonic metal. Oh,
Symphonic.
yes.
Awesome.
Yes. Genre series number 6, maybe?
Yeah.
I think
It's 6.9 is the episode we're on right now.
6.9, and
Yes.
we're gonna dive into symphonic metal. Here's the thing. I think most people probably think that symphonic metal is like, I don't know, like an evolution of neoclassical power metal. And on the surface, there's a lot there.
How dare you think that?
Thing. Really, what happened was power metal, for music, and gothic metal had a threesome, and then 9 months later, symphonic metal. And that the real key ingredient, as we're going to hear today, is the gothic metal element, because neoclassical is more of that, like, it's fast, it's uplifting, it's about slaying the dragon, but gothic metal is really about, it's like the beauty of darkness, right? And when we dive into the symphonic metal stuff today, you're gonna hear it's all this, like, it's this darker tint. So what
Luke,
makes
let's
symphonic
take a
metal
dive.
symphonic metal?
I want to dive into symphonic metal deep.
Right into
Really?
symphonic metal.
Okay, that's too deep. That's too deep, Shred.
Yeah, we're gonna drown. We're gonna drown.
Yeah.
Shit.
Yeah. So
Where
yes,
do we
anyway,
start? Who's like were you saying it goes back to like the 80s with Celtic Frost?
Dude,
That's like
I tell you what,
origin story of symphonic metal.
almost every one of these genres
All
that
goes
we
back.
have been talking about somehow ties into Celtic Frost. These
That's right.
guys, they were so experimental throughout all of the 80s that, I mean, it's like all these genres like picked up on stuff that they tried out and just ran with it.
Like, what was it? Black metal, symphonic metal. What else comes from Celtic Frost?
I mean,
thrash?
death metal was like thrash.
Death metal, yeah, there you go.
But like the death metal has a lot of influences from Celtic Frost. So I mean, those guys literally like spawned, at least 5 or 6 major genres. It's just crazy. And I'll tell you, listening to them is not like, they're not one of my favorite bands, but I see all of the ingredients in there that these bands later came and like really did some really cool stuff with. So
they were kind of progressive metal in that way.
Oh yeah,
With all
they
their
were very
ideas, right? Yeah. So
So
not everybody
Count
like
'em up.
perfects the art form, but they come up with the new idea, that everybody kind of runs with. So that's maybe the Celtic Frost. But so Celtic Frost.
So
Do we
Celtic
listen to
Frost,
them?
we'll check them out here in just 1 second, real quickly. So the highlights here of symphonic metal, we got an image to show. Although for the podcast members, this one's going to be tough. But the symphonic metal starter pack, really, you got to have at least one long epic track.
20 minutes, 13 minutes, 10 minutes. Yeah,
this is so true.
There is a piano ballad, but it's usually after the epic track.
Asking like in 2021, trying to get someone to listen to a 20-minute track. That is brutal.
But that's the thing with symphonic metal is not every track is long. Sometimes in progressive metal, like every track is 10 plus minutes.
Yeah.
In symphonic metal, most of them will be like, 4 to 6.5 minutes. But then, like, Nightwish, they'll have like, the greatest story ever told or whatever.
They bring that
progressive
classical nature comes out. They just can't help it. They
Right.
gotta get one of those on the album. But they do a lot of like more poppy, catchier things that you can like structure, you can get behind. It's a good way to lead people into metal, really, symphonic metal.
It really is, because
it's more accessible.
The ugliness, quote unquote ugliness of death metal is heavily contrasted with like the prettiness of symphonic metal, because you almost always have a female vocalist. You have black leather corsets. It's a much more aesthetically pleasing genre than say like death
pretty
metal.
But not in a glamour way, not in a glamour metal way,
not in a glamorous way. It's true.
And dude, you have to get people in the door, with that sweetness, that prettiness that you're talking about. Man, when I record something and there's no like keyboard element or symphonic, you could put symphonic element in there. It's so much harder to kind of hear like the chords and stuff,
Yeah.
And that like the symphonic stuff, it just really makes everything more clear and accessible. Something to it. So,
and it creates like a much, much thicker, more rounded sound, because you'll have like these background instruments like a cello and violins.
Thickness and roundness. That's what I like.
Thick and round. So what Celtic Frost, one of the aspects of, they were one of the first metal bands to use an operatic female singer in their metal. And that really, a key feature of symphonic metal is this soprano.
But what people don't actually realize is that was me when I castrated myself. I was doing those high pitched vocals.
Brutal.
Well, did you really?
Then I had to I reattached my balls. So that's.
I was gonna say, did you glue them back on, because you're not a soprano anymore?
Dropped. My soprano range is kind of suffering these days. Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe it's time for recastration.
So let's check out, this song is called Rex Irae, and it's from Celtic Frost. Their 1987 album called Into the Pandemonium. And you're going to start hearing some of these symphonic metal ingredients. So here we go. Rex Irae.
Arches of fear, all mortal is love, inbreeding and death, remembrance of one. I am one, the essence, breathing
glorified in yeah.
Now, you would certainly not, if you're familiar with symphonic metal, you probably wouldn't put that in there in the symphonic metal genre.
But maybe we can pick some of these out, right? Like lyrics about tyrannical medieval kings. I mean, that seems like that could fit in with that one, or
songs with Celtic instruments.
Yes, that one. These symphonic metal starter pack elements. They're all over that. I don't know how long that track goes on. But there was so 9
minutes.
There you go. And there was so much verb on her that she almost sounded like a chorus. So, yeah.
Right.
There you go.
Yeah. It's true. So, I mean, there are symphonic elements. You heard the violin, or that might have just been a really high cello.
Sounded like real instruments, too. I mean, they went.
Could have been.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Back in the day.
They certainly weren't samples. There's no way those were samples.
No.
Because that was the year, 1875, and they wouldn't have had, quality samples. So.
Yeah.
Right. So that, I mean, this stuff is being heard by young guys like Christoph Johansson from Therion. And so in the early 90s, late 80s, maybe 89 or something is when Therion formed. And they're a death metal band, right? A full-on death metal band. But he is enamored by Celtic Frost, this idea of having, this operatic singer and then using symphonic instruments. So Therion puts out 2 albums as, like death metal. And then they start radically shifting their sound to the point where it's largely Therion is credited with inventing the modern day symphonic metal genre, or at least being like the godfather of it, right? Much closer than like Celtic Frost was, even though Celtic Frost had a lot of those elements to it. So here is, I believe this was in 1993, Therion album. It was off of I can't remember which album this was, but the name of the song is Symphony Draconis Inferni. And you're going to hear where it starts.
Is he just making words up? I mean, it almost sounds like it's based in Latin, just like the Celtic Frost.
Loosely. Yeah.
I might also be pronouncing it wrong, but like Symphony, Dragon, Infernal. I'm not sure.
Ooh, that's
anyway,
cool.
let's check
could
out
be a symphonic metal chord.
Symphonic uke chord.
Yeah. Fucking ukulele.
By the way, if you haven't listened to Therion, you should check out our Vinyl Wednesday, where we put on a unique record from Therion on YouTube.
We did.
Because it's just excellent and it's worth listening to. But play the
Your
clip.
Metal power will rise to 666 the second you listen to that. So, do it now.
All right, here's Therion. Here is largely this is like if Celtic Frost was symphonic metal's head was just crowning out of the metal vagina. Therion, like the entire head and most of the shoulders
vagina.
are
That's
out.
such an unpleasant picture in my mind right now.
It's really gross. Yeah,
that was
anyway,
a tough analogy.
Let's check out Therion.
Wow.
That is evil AF. Shit.
Well, and so Therion, they were one of the first bands to actually record entire albums with a symphony orchestra.
Really?
So those were live instruments there.
And I would say is like the transition, right, from their death metal to what they are today, because they sound very different. They're way more what I would think symphonic even than that clip now.
Yeah.
Oh, very much so. Yeah, that was that was when they were transitioning from death metal to symphonic metal. And so about 3 years later, 1996, Therion releases an album called Theli or Theli, Theli. And this is where everybody is like, this was the first modern day symphonic metal album. So here's a quick clip of them. It's called 2 Mega Therion, which is the name of a Celtic Frost album, which is where Therion got their name. But then they released a song called 2 Mega Therion, which is based off of a poem. So anyway, here
Luke's
is
got all the
birth.
facts.
Yeah, here the baby is completely outside now. Here is the
outside
birth
the metal
of
vagina.
Outside of the metal vagina.
Making a baby in a metal vagina sounds rough, by the way. I'm going to pass on that.
Okay. Yeah,
Ouch.
somebody else do that.
Ouch.
All right, here we go. Symphonic metal.
of some of the best video quality I've ever seen in my life, right there.
Yeah, they actually made a music video for it, 1996.
That's very forward thinking, and it seems like death metal and metal in general kind of gets hit for being not very musically sophisticated sometimes. But I mean, this is bullshit to the contrary. Yeah, that's some bullshit right there. I mean, maybe metal doesn't really have that connotation anymore, but I feel like it did, back in the day. It's like, it's just power chords and noise. But no, these guys, they got choirs and orchestras, and there you go.
And this is the thing. So I mean, what you heard there is they started bringing in a lot more of that neoclassical power metal element, right? You had the double bass going, and it was like
classical sounding, dark, evil classical. I heard a lot of diminished chords.
Yes. And lyrically, symphonic metal is all about, mythology and legend and all of this kind of stuff. And, Therion, every album usually revolves around some kind of like religion or some kind of mythical element. I mean, that's very prevalent.
Where's Therion from? Northern Europe?
Sweden.
Okay. So what do you know what that particular song was about? What
To Mega Therion?
Yeah.
I don't. Boy, I really should.
But some kind of mythology, probably. Maybe they do like some Norse mythology, or do they do Greek stuff?
Oh yeah, a lot of like a lot of Norse stuff, like Middle Eastern stuff.
Really?
Like their one album is called the Gothic Kabbalah, and so it's a lot about like Middle Eastern stuff.
How do we make those stories more accessible to people now and like Gen Z? Like, because instead of like talking about wet ass metal vaginas, like can we talk about like it's brutal, man. Can we talk about like Norse mythology or because these stories are so rich and full of meaning and depth? I don't know. Maybe
I think they probably had their share of metal vagina in those stories too. There was just other stuff going on as well.
Yeah. Of course, but
there was some wild shit in there.
Yeah. No, it's true. So it looks like To Mega Therion was a poem written by Aleister Crowley.
Oh, wow. No way. Dude, Aleister Crowley is like one of the most evil people ever. He spent the night in an Egyptian crypt. He broke into a pyramid in Egypt for his honeymoon. So he takes his wife. I've told you guys the story before. Yeah, he takes his wife and breaks into an Egyptian crypt, and they spend the night there. It must have been very romantic. I can only imagine.
Yeah, very.
But Aleister Crowley, he's one of the most evil people ever, and mostly in a bad way. But of course, Ozzy Osbourne, Mr. Crowley is about Aleister Crowley.
That's he founded the Church of Satan, right? No, that was Anton LaVey.
No, Anton LaVey, but Anton was influenced by Aleister. So yeah, and do with that wilt that came from Aleister, as well. But I don't know. He was into he had like this religion called Thelema. It just got really weird and bizarre, and I don't get on board with a lot of it. But anyway, an interesting character nonetheless.
So apparently, it also in Greek means the great beast.
So they're talking about the devil.
Yeah, it may refer to the beast described in the Book of Revelation. But
right, same. Satan.
Well,
it's a great topic. It's a great topic for metal. I mean, and it's not that we're bad, evil people. Everybody needs to know. It's just there's dark and light to life, right? And some people like to talk about the light side. Some people like to talk about the dark side.
We have to tell the whole story. I mean, what is good if there is no bad, right? There's only meaning.
Yin and yang is what it is. It's yin and yang. They balance each other out. So where do we go next, Luke? After Therion, what are the next evolutions?
So Theli or Telly, however you pronounce that, came out in 1996. Well, at that time, bands like Nightwish and Within Temptation were formed, they were playing music, but they hadn't released anything yet. And so they were heavily influenced by bands like Celtic Frost, but also then they saw what Therion was doing. And so the three big ones in this field that really made symphonic metal what it is today were Nightwish, Within Temptation, and Rhapsody. They were called Rhapsody at the time. Then they had Rhapsody Fire because of a copyright issue. I tell you what, YouTube, you know, they can suck it because of copyright blocking. But that's been going on for a long time. I mean, Rhapsody had to change their name after like 10 years because of a copyright issue.
Didn't Rhapsody just wrap it up? Like they just quit basically, maybe like last year or.
Well, Luca Torelli left a while ago to go off and do like solo stuff. But yeah, Rhapsody of Fire kept going. I don't know. They might have just called it a day. I'm not sure. Within Temptation's keyboardist, he left with it. Well, we'll get to that. That's part of the story. So,
all right.
So anyway, 1997, this is, you know, the year when it exploded, started. Nightwish released their first album.
It's so recent.
Within Temptation released theirs. Yeah, I know. It seems like it was just a couple years ago, but
why didn't we think of this earlier?
I mean, metal as a whole is pretty new.
Yeah, that's the truth, right? So this is like a progression on to metal. I mean, metal was new, and then 97 was, I mean,
it's about 15 years, right? Because thrash came out in 90 or in 83. And then 96. So it's about 15 years it took to get from thrash
too. A lot of this comes from Prague, if you think about it, right? Because, you know, if we start the clock in 1970 for metal, you know, and that begins with Black Sabbath's first album. But then, you know, there was bands like Yes and Genesis and these Prague bands that were obviously well, I mean, yeah, they were doing some of those symphonic elements.
Oh,
but
sure.
But they weren't metal, you know, so maybe metal got some ideas from there. I don't know. We should get like, who's the guy in Therion? Let's get him on the podcast and like interview him or something.
Yeah.
That's what we should do.
Well, I think nothing exists in a vacuum, right? So it's not like, you know, because even Black Sabbath.
Metal vaginas.
Yeah, that is a vacuum.
Yeah,
straight up vacuum right there.
Even Black Sabbath was influenced by people that came before them, and they were influenced by people that came before them. So, yeah, certainly, I think Prague was really instrumental in pushing, like,
no pun intended.
Going off. Yeah, no pun intended. Going off and like experimenting, right?
Yeah.
And then, of course, that's where all these metal genres come from. Is a thrash metal band that starts experimenting with violins, and then, you know, a thrash metal band that starts experimenting with death growling, and that becomes death metal. You know, I mean, it's all this experimentation thing.
Exploring. That's we were talking about this a couple episodes back. Explore, do it. That's the secret. That's it.
Yeah, because, you know, and also it's worth mentioning in the 80s, probably the two greatest influences in terms of you know, symphonic metal going forward were Yngwie Malmsteen and then, of course, the band Savatage, right? Because Yngwie Malmsteen creates this neoclassical metal, which I have a clip of if we have time, and then Savatage starts which later became Trans-Siberian Orchestra. They start making literally metal covers of, you know, classical pieces. So, like, for instance, I have a clip here of Hall of the Mountain King. This was 1987.
Edvard Grieg. Yes, the original composer.
Yes. And so, and you're going to hear, you know, this is actually a really interesting clip because we talk about Mars, the Bringer of War, and how, you know, Am I Eve and all this stuff. You hear it here in Savatage too.
Yeah. Yeah.
So here's the beginning of Hall of the Mountain King.
I wish I was in the hall of the Mountain King right now. I want to crush beers with that Mountain King. He was jacked for being so old, by the way.
Oh, shooting lightning. And I mean, I think that, this was made, this type of music was made for mythology, right? It's like powerful, it's striking, it's got energy, and it feels epic. You know,
and you're right. Yeah. That was Mars, the bringer of war. That was Gustav Holst right there. They just like did a little quick snippet of it, and then they're into the Mountain King.
And because I'm like, because you turned me on to that was how Black Sabbath starts. That's how Am I Evil starts. And then I hear it here, and I'm like, same thing. This thing is everywhere. Mars, the bringer of war is everywhere. I didn't agree though, saying like the first metal song ever, and it's that.
Yeah.
There it is.
I mean, so many bands were influenced by that. It really focuses on the tritone, which was metal just picked up on and ran with it, in a kind of another direction. But you see the roots there and the evolution.
Yeah. Well, so in the Hall of the Mountain King by Savatage, I know the question you're waiting to ask me is, well, Luke, why isn't that the beginning of symphonic metal? Well, and the
what
thing
year
is,
was that?
That was like 1985 or 1987.
Wow, was it that?
But here's the thing. The rest of that album and a lot of Savage's stuff was more like rock. 80s metal.
Yeah. Okay.
Right. With
so
some
they're dipping their toes in the metal vag right there, just to kind of see what it's like.
Right.
They didn't go all the way in.
They didn't play it as a like that was not their genre.
It's the tip.
Exactly. They were putting that. Yeah, it was 1987. Hall of the Mountain King was 1987. And so that was like they're like toying with it, right? It's just like Celtic Frost. They toy with it. They have these elements of it. But then later it becomes its own genre. So here's Nightwish. Nightwish is by far the biggest symphonic metal band today. And here's the first track off of their first album. The name of the song is Elven Path. And this is where you're really going to see, like, you're going to hear what everybody today considers symphonic metal.
Okay, yeah, there you go. The operatic vocals are there. There's always like a bed of sort of orchestration type sound in the background. And then and harpsichord.
Yeah. A lot of the bands getting off the ground here, with the exception of Therion, who did actually always hire a real symphony orchestra, most of the orchestra instruments are played on a keyboard. Right. Yeah. I mean, Tuomas is using a synthesizer,
but it's still the effect.
It's the effect.
Right.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. And Tuomas likes to wear top hats too. So, I mean, I got to give it to him.
It's true.
I tip my top hat to him.
Free points there.
By the way, Tuomas' black metal side project, which is called something like Betrothed, Death of My Betrothed or something like that. I'm going to have to look it up. It comes out here in like a week or two. I'm really excited about it.
Cool.
But the question is,
Darkwood's My Betrothed. That's what it's called.
When you're working on metal, the question is, does it headbang? Like,
yeah.
I always that's my test. I always work on it. Does it bang?
That should be our line.
Yeah.
Does it bang?
Does it
Well,
bang? We're gonna start
Nightwish-
that. So now you can test every song. You know what to do. You're listening. Is this metal? Wait, let me see. Can I headbang to it?
Does it
Okay. Does it bang?
Yeah.
Well,
That's
they created like they made a just a perfect recipe because you've got the neoclassical sounds. Yeah, the harpsichord sound is in there. They've got originally Nightwish, when Tumos wrote this, it was going to be all instrumental. He wanted to make an instrumental band. And then he heard Tara and was like, that would fit in so well with what I'm writing. And so then the rest is history.
Huh.
So Nightwish now like I said, so like Within Temptation also releases an album in 1997, their first album, but they're much more like they have more of like the Celtic, Viking feel to them. They sing a lot more about like in that song, like she's talking about the sirens, right? It's like Greek mythology.
That's Greek.
Yeah. And whereas like Within Temptation sings more about like pantheism, right? So it's all about like Mother Earth.
Paganism is, yeah.
Yeah. In fact, the clip I have, which is not off their first album, it's actually off their second album, but they had a video for this one. They didn't have any videos off their first album, and I thought this was cool. So Within Temptation, here is the song Mother Earth. Hear the choir, flute.
It bangs.
It bangs well.
You can try, but it is useless to ask why cannot control her. She goes her own way. She moves until the end of time. She gives and she takes.
That's really interesting. They really juxtapose masculine and feminine traits next to each other. That's, I think, one thing that makes the symphonic metal so appealing, right? It's like you have the female vocal. Looks like, trust me, I know. Late at night, I think about it.
What makes it so good?
You have, the female fronted voice, and that gives us, that female energy. And then there's a really aggressive testosterone in the distorted guitars, and the other instrumentation. And that's like a formula that's, really works.
Well, it goes back to the classical angle because it's, with the female vocals are this high register that a lot of the other instruments aren't filling, right? Especially in metal. And so in orchestras, you get that too, that you have all these instruments and they fill. The guy sits there and waits to run his triangle for the 3 hits,
Right.
Because you got to fill that space. It really completes it.
I need a triangle. We should all get triangles. They're pitched at different tones so we can harmonize with each other.
Yeah.
Metal triangle music.
Well, a triangle is like a vagina shape, and so we'll just all play our metal triangle badges.
That's right. Maybe a new genre. We'll just
that's the next
out.
step. That's the next
triangle metal.
Well, so I'm so happy you said that, Shred, because one of the aspects of symphonic metal that you don't see in most other metal genres, maybe not in any other metal genres, is the concept of the Beauty and the Beast vocal style, which is having the high operatic female with the grunting, the death growls.
Yeah.
And symphonic metal really picked up on this. And I think it comes from like its Gothic background, the connection to Gothic metal. So, and the first band, like we heard in Celtic Frost, we heard them having a male singer with the operatic female singer. And then there was a band in the late 80s that did a couple of songs with
Poison,
the Beauty and the Beast style. Wasn't Poison.
Wait a minute. Never mind. I'm thinking of something.
But the first band to ever do an entire album, like their entire style was Beauty and the Beast, was Theater of Tragedy, which is Liv Christine. And so here, and that came out in 1994 or 1995. So here's the song Hamlet for a Slothful Vassal. And you're going to hear, this is where Beauty and the Beast started. And of course, symphonic metal later really latched on to Beauty and the Beast. So here's Theater of Tragedy.
That was tragic.
Oh yeah, so good. And Liv Christine, so she went on after Theater of Tragedy ended. She went on to form Leaves Eyes, which is also a symphonic metal band. But she sang with everybody. I mean, she's worked with Aaron Lucasen. She's worked with Delane. She was on Cradle of Filth album, Midnight Soul. I mean, she is like probably the most prolific vocalist in, like that, the metal world that uses female vocals. She's everywhere, and she's an incredible singer.
There are some great female singers in this space, right? I mean,
they're incredible.
Flori Jansen, Simone Simmons, from Epica, and I think that gives metal even more credibility. It's so crazy to me that I think some people think metal's like this sort of dumbed down version of music, like it's not very sophisticated.
It's crazy talk.
Where people get those ideas, talking crazy.
They get it by not actually listening to it. You know?
Yeah. It's
guitars too. I think.
I think it's because they
decipher them well.
They associate popularity with talent, right? So it's like metal isn't selling, other than Metallica, metal isn't selling millions and millions of albums like Justin Bieber is, and they're not winning Grammys, right? And so
how much does
they're not as talented.
Even sell though? Like,
I have no idea, but that Peaches song is everywhere.
I don't know that he even sells that much compared to Metallica, just because of the age we live in. Where let me look it up.
Look it up. And so anyway, Rhapsody of Fire, or at the time Rhapsody, there were the other ones, and that came out in 97.
Yeah,
they were
70 million. So Metallica sold over 120. So Metallica is quite a bit bigger.
Yeah, but Justin Bieber is the number one. He's the number one.
Would be,
Justin Bieber is the number one artist on YouTube with more than 60 million subs.
60 mil. Okay, so that's the way you have to measure it. But how many subs does Metallica have?
But Metallica has also been around for 35 years, right?
Yeah, there's
almost 40 years. Too. Bieber's been around for like 5. Regardless, the idea is though that like if you're associating how many Grammys a band has with how talented they are, then everybody's going to look down on metal because metal guys don't win Grammys. So it's a total misnomer and it's completely erroneous. There's no question that the proficiency of musical instruments is much higher in metal than in any other genre, save for maybe like jazz. It's ridiculoly complicated stuff.
Jazz does not sell well, and actually neither does classical.
No, I believe that. Yeah.
What do we do about that? It's such a tragedy. It's terrible.
Yeah. Well, hopefully this podcast makes metal the best-selling genre in the world of all time. That would be good. That's the goal. So anyway, let's continue on with symphonic metal. So there's the origin, right? 96 with Therion, then 97 with the trio, Rhapsody, Nightwish, and Within Temptation. Well, things only get better from there. Now, I mean, those guys are actually all still around, and they're all incredible, and they've gotten better and better and better. But the genre gets so cool. And so the early 2000s, this is when probably four of the biggest names in the genre form: After Forever, Sirenia, Epica, and Delane. And so After Forever was the first.
Wait, and 2004?
After Forever put out their first album in 2000.
What, in Delane?
Delane put out their first in 2006. Yeah.
Oh, okay. All right, man.
So, but it was that early, so Mark Jansen was in a band. I think they ended up breaking up or something. And then he formed After Forever, and he hired Floor Jansen as the singer. And so this is where Floor really got her start in metal, was with After Forever. And so here is off their first album. It's called Yield to Temptation.
Because of the undefeated desecration of the
Oh, symphonic metal's getting really good. It's getting
evil.
Heavy. It's getting powerful. Like the recording quality starts getting really good in the early 2000s.
That's another thing, man. Yeah, there's so much going on. It's way harder to mix something like that when you have all those instruments going on, right? Just drums, bass, guitar, vocals is pretty basic, but throw in an orchestra, it's like, whoa, that's some extra shit to do.
Yeah,
get a little bit more triangle in there.
Yeah,
yeah,
we need some triangle action.
So Mark Jansen, no relation to Floor Jansen, by the way. Mark Jansen, he starts After Forever. They put out this album in 2000, and then it's a little sketchy. Like he either gets kicked out or leaves the band in like 2001, and he's dating this girl called Simone Simmons. And Mark Jansen says, I need to put together another band. He had some like disease or something that was affecting his throat. He's like, I need to put together another band.
I feel like I hear that disease in his voice. It's like not in a bad way, but it's like the garbled destruction of the vocal cords. Sounds like what's happening when he's singing. There's something going on.
He had, and I don't know if it was related, because he does death growls in his later bands too. So I'm not sure exactly what the issue was, but I know in an interview I saw with him, he said that he was surprised to learn that he was no longer in the band. So it didn't sound like it was mutual, but anyway, thank goodness, because then Mark decides to go out and start this band called Epica, and he hires his girlfriend, Simone Simmons, to do vocals.
I didn't even have to hire her since she was his girlfriend. Or,
yeah, maybe she did it for free.
Cheap labor.
I don't know. Yeah.
Smart.
So
very smart. Mark.
They put out their first album in 2002 called The Phantom Agony. And they, again, going back to like the Therion strategy, Epica wanted to use real instruments. So here is a clip of their song, The Phantom Agony. And I think this is the official video as well, but you'll see like the instruments actually being played.
great song. I haven't listened to it in a while.
Yes.
Yeah, there you get all the elements. If they were actually recording it, that's such an insane setup. Just metal and orchestra all piled on top of each other.
Yeah.
That I think that was
vocalist,
the
choir.
video.
Yeah,
So that
it was
might not have been like a live. That was not a live record.
Yeah, no, they're
for
just
sure.
miming. They're just miming that. But yeah,
Yeah.
that's cool
they-
to just kind of capture that vibe though, where everybody's all in the studio at once. And
Yeah.
cool.
So I misspoke earlier. That came out in 2003.
Damn
and,
it, Luke.
but
at the
Epica-
very least, I expect you to get your dates right. For God's
100% accurate all the time.
ridiculous.
Yeah, it's so hard. There's so many bands and they're coming
You're
and
off
going.
by
and-
a year. Like, I mean, if it was only
Yeah.
50 days, that'd be one thing. But a whole year,
yeah, it's true. It's true. Well,
you're killing it, son.
so Epica, incredible. So they're setting the standard now. At the same time, Morton Velland, who is he is
Now
also
that's a cool
master in
name.
this field.
Death
Morton
is his
Velland.
name. His name is Death.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mortality, mortuary. That means death is what it means.
Yeah, so he starts in the early 90s, he starts the band Tristania, which is much more on like the death metal with some symphonic elements. After Tristania, he starts the band Sirenia, and Sirenia goes full on, symphonic metal, heavy to the gothic element. And so their first album, At Sixes and Sevens, came out in 2002. And I have that date right, 2002. And so here's
You
At
better.
Sixes and Sevens that you're going to, it's very similar, except much heavier to the gothic side of metal.
So
You make it feel alive, strong. A precious life
Wow, that's cool.
shivers.
So-
The Beauty and Beast that they do is like, it gives me shivers every time. Just that
Are your
of
hairs
specific
erect
content.
on your
Oh.
arms and
Oh,
body?
yeah.
Are you
Yes.
become erect?
So
Your
much
hair
so my
erect.
hat almost fell off.
Oh, damn.
No.
So,
Now, if
Pete,
you
I think
add
we're going to.
six and hold on,
Oh,
if
go
you
ahead.
add 6 and 7 together, you get what's the significance of that? Because then you get number
Mhm.
13, which is very unlucky.
It's actually an
is that?
old expression from England. If you're at sixes and sevens, it means like you're at an impasse, like you can't. Everything's confused. You can't move forward. So
Huh.
it's like a fatalistic type expression. Like we're at
Interesting.
sixes
Like
and
a
sevens. Give
crossroads.
up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. And the thing I was gonna say before, just because I was curious, Morton Velland is he's Norwegian, and so I was curious about
Yeah.
that name though, and I looked it up. Actually, it says it means of Mars or warlike, which is also epic for a name.
Morton means Mars.
Yes.
In Norwegian.
Oh,
Interesting.
no, that's weird. So
Well, that's
yeah.
the Latin origin for Morton.
Oh,
But
okay.
yeah.
Ah, yeah. He
That's-
is quite a dude. He started after Sirenia, Sirenia is still going on, but he also started a band called Mortemia, like named after himself, and it's literally
That's
just
great.
him. But he kind of does an R. and Anthony Lucasen thing, so he'll bring in a whole bunch of people from different bands to help him record an album. And he actually just released one. It's called like the Pandemonium Session. or something like that. And he recorded it last year in 2020. He's
Very clever, Morton.
Yeah, he used the time well. Some people did not use the time well.
Yeah.
So, and then of course the other big one that formed here in the early 2000s was Delane. Delane is very popular today. It's actually the keyboardist that started Within Temptation back in the early 90s or in the late 90s.
Those guys sound so good, man. Like their production. We were listening to them a few months ago. I was blown away by their production.
That new vinyl is
huge.
killer.
And that was their newer stuff. Now this is off their first album, which was released in 2006. So the production's not as good, but it's still incredible. So here's Delane. The song's called Frozen.
I see where Disney got the idea.
Yeah. It sounds better than Disney first. That's cool.
Now,
yeah, still a pretty decent mix and recording quality going on there.
Yeah. Symphonic Metal does a good job of that. So now you'll notice there, like, so the singer Charlotte Vessels, she's Dutch, I believe, and so her background is in singing jazz and classical music, and so she's not like as operatic maybe as like Tara was or something like that.
Yeah.
Which kind of adds a different flavor to the symphonic metal sound.
It's more accessible to the masses too. It's almost like Annette, the Annette singer Annette Olson. Yeah. Because she didn't go as hard on like those high notes.
Right.
There's also just like a general tone that operatic singers have that's just so like polished and formal and maybe less, easy to relate to. That sounded more just, I don't know, colloquial, normal.
Yeah, I think the power of the high soprano range is in the contrast, but it's literally the polar opposite of the death growl. The death growl at its deepest and the soprano at its highest, you can't make out the words they're saying. And so it becomes more of an instrument than it is about the actual lyrics, right?
Interesting.
That is interesting.
And so Charlotte here is more in the middle, right? What would that be called? Like an alto soprano, mezzo soprano?
That'd be called like a Cardi B, I think. She's
no,
don't you dare!
Great,
don't you dare compare those two.
No, actually, Cardi has like a real low, woofy, husky voice. She's like a sub alto. She's a wapto. She's a wapto. Is what she.
Yeah.
Gosh. Just alto voice, lower female voice.
Yeah.
But that still, to Pete's point earlier, it still is above everything else, and so there's that clarity in the mix. That's a big part of when you're recording is that's why, you have something like a bass and a guitar, right? Because the bass occupies a different frequency range than the guitar. Because if things are like all in the same space, they're stomping on each other and it doesn't come through. It's just a mess that way.
That makes sense. Yeah. Because
so
some like
sounded really clear.
Some of the core metal genres, grindcore and stuff, everything is all super low. And so
Yeah.
it just sounds like, one big fuzz.
Harder to mix that stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
Even in Dream Theater's new album, they got the 8-string. They were I was watching their release party video, and they were talking about struggling to mix the 8-string because at points, John's going actually lower than the other John, in the bass. So they're like, what do we do about that?
Yeah. Okay, well, three shout outs. So that's all like, early to mid 2000s, and all of those guys are still around putting out fantastic music today. But there are a few that just started recently within the last couple of years that I really want to do shout outs to. So probably one of the best to come out in the last couple of years is the band Dark Sarah. Now, Dark Sarah, I can never pronounce her name, but her name, Heidi
Luke, don't screw this up.
Parviainen. She's Finnish, and she was the lead singer of the band. Oh, I'm gonna lose it here. Well, so crap, I lost it. But so she was the lead singer of a symphonic metal band. She left and she started this side project called Dark Sarah, which is, I think they're on their third concept album. Oh, it's so good. So good.
Oh, there's like a Dead Sarah though, maybe too. Maybe that's what I'm thinking of. Is there a Dead Sarah band?
Oh, there could be.
Sorry about your luck, Sarah. You didn't make it.
Even darker. They were trying to get darker than dark.
Yeah, how do we go darker than Dark Sarah? Dead Sarah. Well, so here is a track called Dance with the Dragon. And these are concept albums. So it's
do that every night, by the way.
Yeah. Well, does it sound like this shred?
Harder than it is. You have the key that you don't even need. You're standing here between me and my life. I'm sorry to say, what now? Just get off with your tail.
That sounds good.
Yeah, that almost sounded like an opera.
That's I mean, that's kind of, I think, what they're going for. Heidi is operatically trained, or trained with opera, classical opera
trained in the operatic arts.
Yes, there you go, man. So so they released their third album in this series last year. I don't know how many there's going to be, but I think it was called The Golden Moth was the last one. Anyway, so definitely check out some Dark Sarah. Another fantastic one, and here's another band they use all live, not live, but real symphonic instruments, is this band called Ignia. I think it's Ignia. They're from, I believe, the Ukraine, but I'm gonna have to double check that one. Anyway, here's a song called Elga.
Wow, that was interesting.
Yeah.
At the beginning of that, reminds me of what could be the genre of film score metal.
That's what I was gonna
Why is
say.
there not
Yeah.
a film score metal genre? And this is actually kind of something I've been working on. And I wish there was more people who were influenced by like John Williams and Howard Shore and all these film composers. Well, there are Michael Romeo from Symphony X, but it's really not that common. But you get those vibes there.
Well,
Instead
Shred,
of,
I
like,
was sitting here thinking, I feel like we're
They-
marching into Lord of the Rings or something.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Exactly what you were saying. I'm
There's-
so
there's
glad
like
you said
the-
that.
There's the classical element, of adapting classical into metal. But what about the more modern, we use this term classical. John Williams, isn't classical, but he is influenced by guys like Gustav Holst, Mars Springer War, that, Metallica covered. So what about tapping into that as an influence, for the next metal genre? I'm surprised I don't see. Well, I'm sure there are like Lord of the Rings metal bands and stuff, but it's just not that well developed yet,
Yeah.
So
I think that's kind of what symphonic metal is trying to do, right? Because
but it's more,
classical
like I said,
music,
it's more the classical. John Williams, he's doing like new 20th century sounds that aren't classical. I mean, music that was written in the last century, that's not technically classical, right? There's a
Right.
period there, but
right? They're using, it's called symphonic metal, not classical metal, because the idea is they're using the same instruments that classical music uses, but right, it's not classical music by definition, right?
yeah, well, they use
it's
some of the same
orchestral.
chords and structures too, but anyway, I mean, it's
Right.
like if you're watching this and you're trying to find the next way to innovate, look into that space. Like, start listening to the Jaws soundtrack or Jurassic Park.
Please. Shred did some
Looks like-
Jurassic Park metal one time.
Please make Jurassic Park metal.
Oh
Do that
yeah,
for me.
Shred did it
Yeah.
one time in an anthem. He wrote a Jurassic Park metal section
Yeah.
there.
Moment.
It's hard because, like, the first chord that John Williams plays in Jurassic Park, in the they're in the trying to get the raptor out.
Yeah.
There of the cage. It's like a 13-note chord. It's ridiculous. And it's like, well, how do you really like? And that's the problem you come across a lot of times is how do you adapt that to metal? That would make no sense on a distorted guitar.
Right.
But
Right.
there's something there for sure. Like, look into film score metal, and we can get Michael Romeo on the show. I'm sure he would have a lot to say on that topic.
Well, symphonic metal is a great leaping board to get there because they're using a lot of different instrumentations, they're using a lot of different vocal styles and techniques. So let us know what you guys think about symphonic metal. There are a million bands in this space, and unfortunately, there are a lot of bands that literally just sound like Nightwish, or literally just sound like Within Temptation. But there is still a lot of innovation going on in this space. So let us know, particularly in Eastern Europe. Like I said, this Ignia band, they are from the Ukraine. I looked it up.
It sounds like it has a lot of promise. Like you
Oh yeah.
save that to the end of the show, but that sounded like
That's true.
Well,
Nobody's
you
gonna
gotta
get here.
listen. You gotta listen to the end if you want to get our hot tips. That's where we're giving them out.
It's true. Yeah.
You gotta
So,
work
anyway,
for that.
Let us know what you guys think about symphonic metal, and what are you guys listening to?
Give us your top 5 bands. Like,
Yeah.
do you think we're way off on this, or just give us your top 5. What do you think's going on with this genre?
Yes. And if you know of anybody that's doing film score metal, let us know. Because like Rhapsody, sometimes is considered like Hollywood metal. I can't remember what they
Rhapsody
call themselves. Yeah. Luca Torelli likes to consider like the music he writes as like overtures for these big fantasy epics. And so, but it's not really the same thing as like film score.
It sounds
music.
more classical than modern. I don't know what to call it, because when anyone sees like an orchestra playing, they're just like, oh, it's classical. Well, it's not how it works. But yeah, it's like when I listen to Rhapsody of Fire, I hear more of like Bach and Beethoven and Mozart than John Williams and the newer guys there. But I don't know.
Yeah. Well, let us know. Maybe it's out there. Maybe somebody needs to do it. But either way, symphonic metal is fantastic. And so remember that the world ends with you. So keep it metal.